Tiffany Wade's last Instagram post painted the picture of a woman at the top of her game, smiling, surrounded by luxury, as if life was perfect. She was sharing her success with the world, showing off her travels, her designer goods, her freedom. But that image was just a facade. Hours later, Tiffany's life would end in a way no one could have predicted. On October 7, 2023, inside a quiet barbershop in Philadelphia, Tiffany was shot twice, once in the torso, then in the head. Her son, just 7 years old, was right there, frozen in the barber chair, helplessly watching as his mother's life slipped away. It all began with a fight for control. But what followed was a shocking act of violence, a moment that would rip a family apart and leave a community shaken. Who could commit such an act? And why? Was it the love that turned toxic? Or was there something far darker beneath the surface? The truth behind Tiffany Wade's tragic death will uncover a story of betrayal, revenge, and a thirst for control that ended in the ultimate price. Welcome to the Inside the Crime Mind. If you're watching right now, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. More jaw-dropping true stories are on the way. Tiffany Wade was no stranger to hard work. Born into a Muslim family, she was taught early on the value of perseverance, sacrifice, and determination. But it wasn't just her upbringing that made Tiffany special. It was her ambition. At just 20 years old, Tiffany became a registered nurse, starting her career with a sense of pride that would follow her throughout her life. But she wasn't content just to work for someone else. Tiffany had dreams, big ones. She wasn't just building a career. She was laying the foundation for an empire. By the time she hit her late 20s, Tiffany had already built 3 businesses from the ground up. First, there was her home care service, where she helped provide support for families caring for loved ones. Then, she launched a luxury hair extension line, Nyla Amore, which quickly became a brand known for its quality and elegance. She was on top of her game, using her platform and her success to inspire others. And just as she was basking in the glow of these achievements, she decided to start a new venture. Season Kisses, a business that would build on the same principles of luxury and personal care she had used to dominate the beauty industry. Tiffany wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a mother, a fighter, and a symbol of what hard work and vision could accomplish. She fought for everything: her children, her future, her independence. She was determined to create a better life for herself and her children, one that wasn't dependent on anyone else's success but her own. But while Tiffany was building her empire, there was someone from her past who would ultimately tear it all down. Armond Hilton. He wasn't like Tiffany. He wasn't a symbol of hope or strength. Armond's life had been marked by trouble from the start. With a criminal history that included kidnapping, robbery, and weapons charges, he was a man used to breaking the law. He had been in and out of prison, a shadow of his own potential. But despite his record, Tiffany stood by him. She believed in him. She saw something in Armond that the rest of the world didn't. Maybe it was his charm, his promises, or perhaps a deep-seated loyalty that kept her tethered to him. Even when the evidence of his failures and mistakes piled up, Tiffany's friends and family couldn't understand why she kept going back to him. But to Tiffany, it wasn't about the man he was at the moment. It was about the man she believed he could become. Together, Tiffany and Armond had a son, and despite his criminal lifestyle, Tiffany worked tirelessly to provide for their child. She even stood by Armond while he was behind bars. It was during this time, with Armond in prison, that Tiffany would make a decision that would ultimately seal her fate. Armond had properties, a small real estate portfolio he had accumulated before his arrest. While he was locked away, Armond made the decision to transfer the properties into Tiffany's name. He trusted her, believed she would take care of them until his release. He thought that once he was free, they would pick up where they left off. But Tiffany, determined to create her own future, didn't just manage the properties, she thrived with them. Under Tiffany's guidance, those properties became more than just assets. They became the foundation for her new business ventures, her path to financial independence, and the key to her freedom. She turned Armond's properties into legitimate businesses, and in doing so, she began to cut ties with him. She changed the locks. She sold some of the properties. Tiffany was no longer the woman who had stood by a man in prison. She was now a woman who was carving her own path, one that no longer included Armond Hilton. Tiffany had built an empire of her own, and in doing so, she had freed herself from the weight of her past. But freedom came at a cost. For Armond, the man she once believed in, the man she had once fought for, this was nothing short of betrayal. And when Armond was finally released from prison, that betrayal would set in motion a series of events that would lead to one of the most tragic outcomes imaginable. Tiffany's newfound independence was a direct threat to Armond. The woman he had trusted had taken what he thought was his, and now there was nothing left but rage. The wheels of fate had already begun to turn. As Armond Hilton spent years behind bars, a storm was gathering, a storm of anger, resentment, and a sense of ownership that would soon erupt. Tiffany's success, her rise from the ashes of their broken relationship, had ignited something in Armond. It wasn't admiration. It wasn't pride. It was something far more destructive, jealousy. And as his release date loomed closer, his fury grew, consumed by a sense of betrayal. In those days after his release, Armond's social media presence became increasingly erratic. What started as occasional comments soon escalated into violent threats, each post more chilling than the last. Tiffany, ever vigilant, shared these messages with her followers. One of his posts read, "You took what was mine, and now I'm coming for you." The words echoed through Tiffany's mind, a chilling reminder of the man she had once loved. But she didn't back down. Instead, she posted motivational messages to her followers, messages of strength and independence. She was standing firm, refusing to let the threats scare her. Still, no one could ignore the warning signs. Tiffany's followers, her community, became more concerned. She had faced challenges before, but this felt different. Armond wasn't just a disgruntled ex-husband. He was a man with a violent past, a man who had nothing to lose. And now, he had nothing but revenge on his mind. October 7th started like any other day. Tiffany was at Platinum Cuts, a local barbershop in Philadelphia, waiting for her 7-year-old son to get a haircut. It was supposed to be a simple afternoon, a mother and son bonding time, a moment of normalcy in an otherwise chaotic world. Tiffany, relaxed, scrolling through her phone, unaware of the horror that would soon unfold. Then, without warning, the door to the barbershop swung open. It was Armond. He walked in, his eyes scanning the room, settling on Tiffany. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. The room, filled with the sounds of buzzing clippers and idle chatter, suddenly felt suffocating. Armond didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, his anger burning through every step. The gun, hidden beneath his jacket, was drawn with a deadly precision. Tiffany looked up, perhaps recognizing the look in his eyes. The same look she had seen so many times before. Only now it was filled with rage, a rage that had been simmering for years. The first shot rang out, piercing the quiet of the barbershop. Tiffany gasped, clutching her torso. The second shot came almost immediately, a fatal blow to the head. Her body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Tiffany's son, still seated in the barber's chair, was paralyzed with fear. He had witnessed the unimaginable. His mother, the woman who had fought so hard to give him a better life, was now gone in an instant. His world, once filled with warmth and safety, had shattered. I looked over, and she was gone, the child later said, his voice trembling with the weight of what he had seen. I couldn't believe it. My mom, she was just there, and then she was gone. The barbershop, once a place of routine, was now a crime scene. Customers scattered, some running for the door, others too stunned to move. Armond, his mission complete, fled the scene just as quickly as he had arrived, leaving behind only chaos and devastation. Outside, the streets were eerily quiet. Armond had vanished into the night, just as he had done so many times before. But this time, he wasn't just evading the law. This time, he had committed a cold-blooded act, a senseless killing that would send shockwaves through the community. Tiffany's death wasn't just a tragic event. It was a story of a woman who had fought her whole life for her freedom, only to be silenced by the one person she had once loved. A man who, despite all the years and all the chances, couldn't let go of his need for control. And now, a child would grow up without a mother. A family would grieve the loss of a woman who had everything to live for. And the question that would haunt everyone was, why? Why did it have to end like this? Why did love, once filled with promise, turn into something so deadly? The search for Armond Hilton would soon become a manhunt as the authorities scrambled to bring him to justice. But for now, the community was left to pick up the pieces, wondering how someone they once trusted could commit such an unforgivable act. The scene inside Platinum Cuts was chaotic. Tiffany was gone, but the real work had only just begun. The barbershop, now marked by the bloodshed of her final moments, would soon become the focus of an investigation that would shake the local community to its core. The first order of business for the police was a manhunt. Armond Hilton had fled the scene, disappearing into the night, leaving behind only his cold, calculated act of violence. Within hours, law enforcement began a massive search for Armond. His face, already familiar to those who knew his criminal history, would soon be plastered on billboards, TV screens, and across social media. Authorities believed he was hiding somewhere in the city, perhaps with people who feared him or owed him favors. But as the hours stretched into days, the hunt for Armond began to feel like a chase against time. But it wasn't just the traditional methods of policing that were going to help solve this case. As detectives combed through the crime scene, they turned their attention to the digital trail that Armond had left behind. Tiffany, ever the businesswoman, had built a following on social media. Her Instagram account had become an extension of her life, showing off her businesses, her family, and her journey toward success. But in the months leading up to her death, her social media also became a diary of terror. Armond's violent threats toward Tiffany had been posted publicly, a clear warning of what was to come. In her posts, Tiffany had shared his increasingly disturbing messages, hoping to warn her followers and perhaps even protect herself. As detectives scrolled through Tiffany's Instagram, they began to piece together the terrifying timeline. Armond's threats, made in the weeks leading up to the murder, were unmistakable. "You took what was mine, and now I'm coming for you." Those words, now forever etched in the investigation, were more than just the rantings of an angry man. They were a confession, a chilling declaration of intent. Detective Thomas Hayes, one of the lead investigators on the case, said it plainly. "We knew this wasn't a random act." Armond had made his intentions clear for weeks. The posts weren't just a warning. They were a map of his plan. The digital evidence wasn't just found in Armond's threats. It was also in Tiffany's own words. Tiffany had shared everything, her fears, her struggles, and the mounting anxiety she felt as the threats grew more violent. Her followers, many of whom had been supportive, were now caught between concern and confusion, unsure of what could have been done to help. As the investigation deepened, the detectives began to interview witnesses, including the patrons inside the barbershop when the shooting occurred. They recounted the chaos. The shock of the gunshots, the horror of seeing Tiffany collapse, and the immediate panic that ensued. But what struck investigators most was the reaction of the people who knew Armond, those who were close to him, who could have helped authorities understand his next move. But no one had the answers. The community, divided by fear and uncertainty, didn't know where Armond had gone or who might be helping him. People feared him, and some were too scared to speak up. But the one thing that everyone agreed on was this: Tiffany had been a victim of something more than just a violent act. She had been caught in a game of control, a web of manipulation that Armond had been weaving for years. Detective Hayes spent hours poring over the evidence, police reports, witness statements, and, of course, the digital trail left behind by Tiffany. The more he looked, the more he realized how critical Tiffany's social media had been. Her posts didn't just show off her life. They told investigators everything they needed to know about the state of her relationship with Armond, about his growing obsession, and about the danger she was in. The police weren't the only ones investigating. Tiffany's family, her friends, and the community began to ask questions too. Why hadn't Tiffany left Philadelphia, where Armond had so many ties? Why hadn't she returned the properties that Armond had transferred to her name, as he had demanded? While some saw her as a victim who had fought for her freedom, others questioned her decisions. Had she done enough to protect herself? Was there more that could have been done to stop Armond before he finally pulled the trigger? As the days passed and the search for Armond intensified, the sense of urgency grew. Tiffany's family was left to cope with the aftermath of her death, and the community was left to mourn the loss of a woman who had built so much, only to lose it all in a moment of violence. But there were still no answers to the biggest question: where was Armond? The investigation would continue for weeks, with the police exploring every lead, tracking down Armond's known associates, and analyzing the digital footprint he had left behind. The search for him would soon turn into a nationwide manhunt. But as they closed in on his last known whereabouts, Armond remained elusive, as slippery as the fear that had followed him all his life. In the meantime, the city of Philadelphia would have to reckon with the fact that a man, driven by greed and a twisted sense of control, had shattered the lives of an entire family. And as the investigation progressed, one truth became clearer with every passing day. This wasn't just a case of a man killing his ex-wife. This was a case of possession, of control, and the devastating consequences that came with it. The community was divided after Tiffany's death. Some viewed her as a victim of betrayal, while others questioned why she didn't return Armond's properties. Opinions were torn, with some saying she should have given everything back, while others supported her right to keep what she built. Some say she should have given everything back, while others say she built her life from the ground up. The community was divided. The search for Armond continued, but despite a public manhunt, he evaded capture for some time. His notoriety grew, and fear spread throughout the community as he remained on the run. Tiffany's family struggled to cope with the loss, especially her eldest daughter, who became the pillar of strength for her siblings. She was my mother, but now I have to be the strong one for my siblings. It's hard, but we'll get through it. Tiffany's legacy, marked by her hard work and success, was now forever intertwined with her tragic death. She had fought for everything: her businesses, her children, and her freedom. But in the end, she lost it all in an act of violence. Tiffany's story highlights the dangers of possession disguised as love. What began as a relationship of love turned deadly due to control and betrayal. What began as a relationship of love ended with one man's desperation and a woman's life taken in front of her child. Could Tiffany have avoided her tragic fate? Would you have stood your ground? Or would you have tried to escape? In a world where control can disguise itself as love, we must ask, how do we escape the grip of violence before it's too late? Tiffany's tragic end serves as a reminder to recognize the warning signs and act before it's too late.